So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray.
I did have a look at your podcast website, and that is kind of the main topic of today's conversation is going to be about your podcast. When you actually started.
So let me get my timelines together. So 2023, 22. So it was around 2021, mid 2021. I had been working as a marketing consultant in a soil-based business, and I was having really good offline conversations with people about soil. And I think we got to the end and we're like, oh, this should have been a podcast. And I think a lot of people have those situations in their life. And so I then went, well, why don't we just start a podcast? And instead of having these conversations between two people, we can have these conversations between two people. And then I see it as like a gift to the world, where then everyone can kind of like eavesdrop and listen into the conversation and get some magic from it as well. So that's why I really love the form of, the medium of podcast, because you can kind of just sneak into someone else's conversation and have thousands of people hear that and get value from it.
When did you start seriously kind of taking action on putting the podcast together?
Well, at the time I was already doing like YouTube content, and we were creating like videos. And so, it probably took about 3 months to get it all off the ground. I've done a podcast before, so I was a little bit seasoned to how to get a podcast off the ground. So I think the runway to get it started was about 3 months. And so, that was like getting a whole batch of recordings done, finding people to interview. And I kind of remember the day where I put a post in one of the Facebook groups, and I was like, crazy idea. I don't know what this podcast is going to call, but I'm going to start a podcast all about soil. Like, pop your name in the comments or tag people you would like to be interviewed. And within like a couple of hours, I had 20 people that I could reach out to and ask if they wanted to be on a podcast that was all about soil. And I remember emailing them and going, I don't know what we're going to cover or how it's going to go, but do you want to come on a podcast and talk about soil? And I had like 10 guests lined up even before I knew what the podcast was going to be called.
That's when you know you've like struck gold in terms of like conceptualizing a great idea, And I find that BudLife has been received with a very similar energy, where everyone who hears about it is really keen to come on board and to see what they can contribute and kind of take part in it. Because I think, like the fundamental part of what I think you and I are both trying to do in this space is a similar thing, where we're trying to get these conversations with people who know so much, recorded in a way that you can instantly share with a bunch of other people who don't know about this thing. So why soil? Like I know you said that you were working at a soil company before. Are you still there?
Oh, so I'm not in that particular business anymore, but that's opened the pathway into other things. So in a quick snapshot, I was doing like digital marketing consulting. One of my clients was a soil-based business, fell in love with soil, went down the soil rabbit hole, and then did my project with them over COVID and digitalized their offline business into an online business. And then post that started Soil Connect, which is the marketing with the soil caring niche at heart. So now I do marketing and the podcast around all soil-based businesses.
That's amazing. That's such within a niche. And it's it's a great spot to be in for something like marketing, I find. Yeah, because it's one of those areas where your audience will know instantaneously if you don't actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And I think it's because it just kind of all fell into place. And I didn't really have, sometimes in the business world, it's like, oh, you need a plan and you need to do a SWOT analysis, and we can get very caught up in all the like things that you kind of need. You need to know your persona and your avatar, and there's all these buzzwords. And then this is kind of an example where, to take the pun of mud, I was throwing mud on the wall and seeing what stuck. I was like, oh, that's working. I'll keep doing more of that, So I was literally just throwing mud at the wall, and whatever stuck, I just kept doing more of that. And the podcast was definitely one of those things that when I finished an episode, I felt inspired and on top of the world and found it very energizing, and then loved the idea that it could then inspire and energize and provoke new thoughts to people who are listening on the other end. And I think the theory with podcasting is you do it even if no one's going to listen. And then if they listen, it's a bonus. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally the case. So in the podcast itself, do you interview a new person every single episode?
Correct. Yeah. So there's a couple of episodes that are just solo, me talking about my thoughts and ideas or a guide that I've put together and things like that. But 99% of the episodes are with a guest, and there's no planning. A lot of the guests or some of the guests are like, do you have like a run sheet? What are the questions we're going to go through? And I don't necessarily like doing podcasts like that because I feel like it all then comes from the head and not the heart. So for me to create a more authentic, it's like we're just having a chat over coffee. I purposely designed it that there was very minimal given to the guest. And so we jump on the podcast, and because it's their area of expertise, they can tend to talk very well. And then I just become very curious and keep asking questions that go deeper into their expert field. And the only scripted question, I guess, if they're a listener to the episodes, would know that they become the voice of the soil. So that's where the whole name of the show, Secrets of the Soil, comes from, is that all my guests kind of embody the soil and become the mouthpiece to then give a voice to the soil and share its secrets to the, 8 billion people currently on the planet.
Yeah, fantastic. What's something that you've learned through the podcast that other people are always surprised to find out about soil?
About soil? I think...
or about anything else. It's really up to you how you answer this.
Yeah. I think one of the things people are surprised about is that the podcast isn't monetized and it's a passion project. So I think that's one of the things that people, because of the way that it's kind of delivered and polished and on a cycle, people tend to think that there's like a big budget behind it. So haven't been picked up by Spotify or anything like that yet. But from a soil point of view, I think what people really, and what the purpose of what I do at the moment is to let people know that soil is very different to dirt, and that soil is a living organism and is pretty much in the world of biology, very similar to the human biology. And so when we start realizing that soil has life in it and is a living organism, we then need to change our mindset to start treating it like that. And so the same way as we wouldn't treat, animals or pets or children in certain ways, we need to use that loving, caring, nurturing aspect of a human being on soil as well. And that once we solve that bridge or that gap, soil provides to the plants and the trees provide to the animals and the wildlife, and then we benefit from that. And then our gut biome matches a lot of the biology in the soil as well. So that soil to stomach link is also another big aha moment that people get very curious about to learn more.
No, 100%. I mean, like we talk day and night about how the earth is a living organism, and we don't ever specify how it lives and how you can interact with it. And soil is such a big part of that. And I feel like it's a clear and quite an obvious connection to Mother Earth that we can instantly get gratification from, I feel like you yourself are probably definitely more of an expert than I am on soil, and definitely more of an expert than many, many other people are on soil. So if somebody were to want to get started on improving the quality of their soil in their house, what would be the number one thing that they could do to get like the biggest bang for your buck?
It's a very interesting question, and I'm going to answer it a different way to what you might expect, because a lot of people think that we need like a gadget or a gizmo, or we need to do like pH testing and all that. And what I like to do in my presentations is talk about the 5 senses that we get, which are given to us for free, and we can use like literally while we're on this reading podcast. And it's like, does it look good? Does it smell good? Some people who are very comfortable with their soil will even taste it. And elders and so forth would know from like the taste of the soil of like what was grown there. And And so using sight, hearing, do you hear wildlife around your soil? Are you seeing bugs? Are you seeing fungi? Are you seeing moss? Can you smell like that it's not right? Does it smell like it's rotting? Is it, anaerobic? It's the same with a compost. It should smell good, And so that's one of the things that I always give people is as your first line of defense before complicating it with any lab test or things, gadgets and gizmos should be, do I feel comfortable with the 5 senses assessment type of thing? And so, we're just looking for things like that and keeping it really simple and kind of trusting our gut and our intuition sometimes. Do we feel like the plant is in the right spot? Do we feel that we're creating enough biodiversity to encourage all the different bugs and the biomes? And that's kind of one of the things. And then the other thing I like to shake people's feathers with a little bit is to stop using the word weeds, because weeds is kind of a human created concept, and every plant on the planet has a purpose. And when a plant that we call weed, which is basically a plant not in our desired spot, we might not like that weed, quote unquote, is there, but the soil does, and the soil wants that plant there because that plant is doing something to repair it. And once the soil is fixed, it will get rid of that plant and the next plant will come. And so that's the line of plant succession. So we need to stop thinking about weeds as something bad and being more curious to that and going, what is the soil trying to tell me? The fact that plant is growing there. And what do I need to do to improve that environment so that plant disappears naturally, not with a chemical or by removing it?
No, that's a great point. It's a very recent piece of knowledge for me that you can grow things in soil to improve the quality of the soil. I didn't realize that was a thing. I want to ask, is there any, obviously in any area, to use native plants in the soil that you have would be beneficial for obviously the patch that you're trying to improve. Are there go-to plants that would have that role in, say for instance, in the bulk of Sydney? Is there something that you can put in your soil that is native that will improve the quality of? I know this is a very specific question. And it's okay if you
probably outside of my, because plant biology, and so I know it. Yeah, it's and I think this is the whole point of people wanting that one thing that they can do, and I don't know if we can. So this is I'm sharing another little story. Farmers that I work with a lot, and even people in their own backyard, what happens is, once the soil conditions get right, the native species appear automatically. And so what happens is seeds can remain in the ground dormant for a very long time. And then when the environment is correct, that seed flourishes. And so instead of putting a native plant somewhere when the conditions aren't right, what we need to do is start reversing what we've done to landscapes and allowing it to go back to its natural kind of way. And then when the timing is correct, that native plant will appear miraculously. And I've got farmers who would share about a particular species of plant appearing that 2 generations, 50 to 100 years, hasn't seen that plant on their property. And they have no idea where the seed came from or how it started growing. So I don't think there is a one size fits all. But the other thing to keep in mind is think insects. So think above the ground just as much as below the ground. So a lot of insects and birds and bees are pollinators, but they're also pest management. So when you have a biodiversity of different plants, some pink, some yellow, some have nectar, some have pollen, that will bring in different species of bugs that we might initially think are a nuisance, but that bug might actually be removing another bug. So, for instance, ladybugs remove aphids. So if you have an aphids problem, you most likely don't have enough ladybugs to eat the aphids. And so then you start asking the question, what do I need to plant to introduce the ladybug? And then once the ladybugs come, there might be a spider that eats them. And so if you've got too many ladybugs, then you say, what eats ladybugs and what introduces those? So that's how I tend to look at reversing and repairing or healing a landscape.
I'm beginning to understand like the direction of your thinking, because really, I guess I've come into this in the same way that probably a lot of people do, is what can I do to have an effect on something that I know needs improvement. Whereas the way you've been looking at it is what needs improving and how can I help the thing itself repair itself so that automatically the problems that I'm trying to solve get solved naturally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really,
so a lot of people want to add something, and this is what's happened in the farming world, is what do I need to add to make the leaves greener? But I think the thinking and what's been lost is what do I need to do less to make better quality food? It doesn't matter that the leaves are yellow, but if the food's more nutrient density, then that's what matters. So, and I think this is like one of the things that one of the things that's been observed recently is like the less you do to a landscape, the more it thrives. It's humans who feel that they can intervene and control the environment that tends to mean that the landscape goes in the opposite direction. So it's a bit of a weird way of answering that, but it's like less is more. The less we do, the more it thrives. Because you think about all the rainforests, like no one's killing them or weeding or, spraying pesticides and fungicides and herbicides. And rainforests are moist, wet. They have their own little rain, that's why they're called rainforests. Like they create their own rain. And so they just thrive on their own without any human intervention. And,
the idea is more that there was already a pre-existing ecosystem that we've disrupted. So what can we actually do to repair the disrupted ecosystem so that what was there before can remain?
Correct. Yeah. And so what we can do as like, I guess, people buying produce and things like that, or planting in their own backyard, if we're going to be buying food, knowing where it comes from, knowing the story, knowing the farmer, what type of farming practices are they following? Is it, syntropic? Is it regenerative? Is it holistic? It doesn't matter the process, but are they caring for the land and making it better today than what it was yesterday? And I think that is, one of the keys is that are we supporting food systems that make the planet better and leaving it better every day? And I don't think there's ever a farmer that wakes up and says, what part of my farm can I destroy today? But there are definitely people who maybe are misguided or misled based on who they're getting their information from, or, which companies are motivated to sell certain products in the system. So I don't think there's anyone doing it intentionally bad, but there are some that are doing it better than others.
Yeah, I definitely the more grown up I am and the more growing I have to do, the more I realize that the entire world is composed of people with good intent. And everything that anyone ever does is I would give them the benefit of doubt of hoping that people are coming at it with good intent at the very least. And Absolutely. It's either misinformation or a misunderstanding or a lot of those kinds of things that go wrong in the process. But these are all solvable problems, And I think, it's really wonderful to know that you get approached by so many of these people who want to be doing better. And it's I mean, to kind of backtrack a little bit. How do you meet peers? Like, how do you meet other people in your area? Because it is so niche, right? Like, is there like a soil expert convention that I don't know about that I would love to find out about? Like, does that exist?
There has been lately. I think, honestly, COVID helped a lot in a weird way, because I think a lot of these soil-based meetups and events were happening in regional communities all around the world. And then what happened during COVID is that everyone was kind of forced to do them online. So there were like soil summits, and there were, a lot of carbon, because soil is a good kind of sink for carbon, to put carbon back into the soil. And carbon is basically the sugars that the soils and the plants use to thrive, from carbohydrates and so forth. And so going to these conferences, and there's a lot of ag shows and things like that. I think that's pretty much where that's kind of happened. Maybe 5 years ago, a lot of the ag shows are more about sheep and cattle and, tagging technology and GPS stuff. But over the last couple of years, especially post-COVID, it's definitely moved down this carbon/soil conversation. And so we're meeting more and more people who want to talk about soil. But honestly, because a lot of this happened during COVID, I didn't have to leave my bedroom. Like a lot of the contacts I've met have all been online. I would just be on a webinar or a Zoom call and someone will be chatting. I'll be like, I love the way that you're thinking. Like, let's connect. And do you want to tee up a Zoom meeting? And everyone was open to it and still is. And so I just met a lot of these people online, Facebook groups, stalking people on LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff, very much an online world. And there are a lot of like Slack communities and Facebook communities all around caring for soil and regenerative agriculture and, lots of content on YouTube. And I would just message the channel owner and be like, I love this video. Do you want to come on the podcast and talk more? And 99% of the times they say yes.
Yeah, definitely. Is it the same? I mean, okay, so in a lot of these other kinds of communities that are plant or just in general, like environment based, I found that a lot of them are very American. So is it the same thing in soil where you have to really specify, obviously, the area that you're in so that you get localized and relevant information? Or is it more of a like a standardized way of thinking behind soil that all of you can internationally get together and essentially be solving the same problems together?
Great point. And one that I have a little bit mixed opinions on this because I'm fairly, I guess, newish into the soil space. And when I zoom out, so my thing is that soil has a global language. I believe that because soil is based on biology and I guess science, we do need to start treating soil a little bit more globally. So the whole climate zones, the whole borders, again, they're all human-made imaginary lines on a map that is also, kind of created. So all these borders and climates, even the fact that like we've got farmers that are in some climates that say we haven't experienced our true climate in 4 years, 5 years. And I think, again, if we start thinking about, that works over there because you're in a subclimate, or that works over there because you're in this climate zone, this is when we start limiting our beliefs of what's not possible in the new thinking, and we keep basing it on the old thinking. So when I came into this space, I said, I don't care what zone you're from, let's just talk about soil. And the more that I started speaking to everyone who believed they were in different subclimates and things like that, what I realized is that soil functions the same and soil has a global language. Yet, of course, there are some environmental differences because in different parts of the world, certain plants won't grow, but there's normally an equivalent. So if you need a plant, a particular plant in Australia because it helps with nitrogen, then maybe it's a different plant in America. But the concept of repairing or putting nitrogen back in the soil to get the chemical, because it's chemistry and biology, if you get the chemistry right, then soil functions correctly. So I guess I'm on a mission to break this kind of idea of soil has boundaries of different zones and which part of the world and what type of farming you're doing. And if we start, it's kind of like saying in the human body that our heart work different because we're in a different country. And that's not true. Like the human biology works the same globally and all the scientists can agree on that. And so the research, you might eat different foods, but your heart still functions the same and your lungs still function the same and your blood has the same makeup, and we do genome sequencing, which is the same method across all different people around the world. Soil is exactly the same as that.
Are you causing any controversy with that? Is there anyone who...
Yeah, I think so. And that's fine. I don't go too openly about it. And I think this is one of the things, if we don't start thinking differently, we're just going to get the same as we've always gotten, and I think we do need to push the boundaries. We need to question the way things are being kind of researched. And, there are a lot of people in this space, like we know more about the deep oceans and Mars than what we know about our own soil. And it's only really been the last kind of 6 to 10 years that people have been adopting this kind of new way of thinking with soil. And you've seen some books that come out that are a little bit like woo-woo, where they're talking about trees are communicating with each other under the ground using the mycelium network. And then you fast forward and more people are going, no, they're right. Like this tree sent this signal to this tree, 100, kilometers away because a fire was coming, or, certain things happened. And more of that research is getting time of day and acknowledged as something that we need to explore further. And so I think of late, we've been focusing a lot more on the soil, and we're realizing that a lot of the solutions, which I like to call soil-lutions, are right under our feet.
Yeah. Nah, that's a great way of looking at it. I'm learning a lot in this conversation, so every now and then my brain just has a bit.
And one of the things I always say to anything I do is, I might be right, I might be wrong. That's for you to then go and discover. So when you start going down the rabbit hole, then you can make your own assumptions, and hopefully you go down the rabbit hole and you start seeing similar things to what I'm saying. You should never take what I say as verbatim or like the end of the discussion. It should just provoke a thought and go, well, that's really interesting. I want to go deeper in that. And then you will go find the papers that either support that or doesn't support it. And you might be surprised what you find down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, definitely. This is gonna slightly change the topic again a little bit. But when you tell people that you're meeting for the first time that you have a podcast on soil, what is typically the first reaction?
Soil? Really? How do I listen? So
really?
I think a lot of people are very intrigued that it's so niched. I think we're all born with this we're born with this thing inside us where we are connected to the soil and the rhythms of the earth, and we kind of lose that somewhere during our education system and parenting style and having to grow up and go in the world. But there's even research now about the pheromone, the smell of soil, triggering the same mental and chemical changes as antidepressants. And, and so there's this kind of chapter in our life where we've been told soil is dirty and germy and don't touch it and go clean your hands. And in fact, it should be the opposite. It should be soil is enriched with, microbes and the biome that we need to thrive as humans. So go touch it, go play in the mud and the rain. And like, you think about kids, the first thing they want to do when they get into mud is make a mud pancake or a mud something. Like, why? Yeah. And if you look at kids playing that don't have any contrast, have any like world rules embedded into their brain, the first thing they do is they touch the mud and they put it in their mouth. And so you got to ask the question is like, why are we born with this innate feeling of like touching soil and putting it in our mouth? And it's because as a baby, we're inoculating our body with all the biomes to help our body and our immune system become really strong. And so we've lost that because we've gone into this germophobic kind of world. And so, when people hear that I have a podcast about soil, they're a little bit kind of taken back, because I think a lot of the times soil is like demonized or dirty and germy and don't touch it and stay away from it. So they're really intrigued about how do I talk about soil.
That was definitely the case when I was growing up. It was always, stay inside, don't go out. Like, outside is there germs and all of the rest of it. And it has it's funny because while you were describing the kind of the process of, as a child, you have all of these instincts that you're born with that you lose later on in life. It's the same way that a lot of people describe everyone's innate sense of creativity and art. It's something that you have a grip on so strong when you're a kid, and you don't care about anybody else's opinion on the thing that you're making. You just have to make stuff. And then over time, you lose that. And you lose that probably because of the influence of the wider world and all of the rest of it, especially in that those early teenage years. So I do a lot of workshops with kids, and I always notice that it's from when they're about 9 to when they're about 12 is when that sense of confident creativity gets lost. And when you hit about 12 or 13, that's when they start hiding the things that they're making. And it's just such a shame. It's really such a shame. And it's part of my work in a lot of these workshops is to give them that confidence again because they haven't stopped making. That's the thing. It's that they lose confidence. And then as you lose confidence, the more and more you let go of that confidence, the less you create. And eventually over time, it ebbs away. And it's an interesting, comparison to wanting to eat mud, honestly. Because we're all born with this connection to Earth, and over time you lose it just probably because of the exposure that you have to the environment that's around you. And oddly enough, art is a wonderful way to get reconnected to that sense of that you're part of an environment and not just guy in control of the thermostat no matter where you go. And it's
100%.
Yeah,
I agree. There is definitely, I'm glad that you've kind of seen the same thing in the artistry world. And I think it's like you think about, like, you make a really good point. When you go to kinder, you draw something that doesn't look like a house, doesn't look like a dog, doesn't look like mum and dad, but yet mum and dad will put that up on the wall and be like, look, it's our family. There's just this, you accept it. And then you get to a certain point and it's like, don't be silly. You don't draw humans like that. You got to draw it like this. And this is the right way to do it. And this is what a house looks like. And yeah, you're 100% right that we don't care when we're kids that something doesn't look like a dog or doesn't look like a house or doesn't look like a person. But then we grow up and everything. Yeah, so very good. And I think the same thing happens with soil and, the inner child of us. So I guess a challenge for both of us would be, how do we do your art workshops but use soil as like the the basis of drawing and design? So we're getting kids in the soil and creating art.
I have a very good friend of mine who goes out and makes her own paint. So she goes out and collects different samples of soil from all over New South Wales. And brings them home and then grounds them up, mixes them with oil, turns oil paints.
I think I follow them on Instagram.
And it's just I think something like that would be such a valuable exercise just to practice. And it's it really blends, I think, the things that you and I are talking about into like one activity that could really just help people, Yeah,
and even think about like all the research around grounding, like grounding yourself and touching the ground and mixing that. I've always had this kind of thought of mixing like a yoga session with grounding / soil. So you would do a move, but then you would like scoop up soil and like smell it and get the pheromones into your body and be really connected. You'd feel the moisture in your hands while you're doing certain things. I think there is some space there to kind of go deeper in this and get people understanding, this amazing thing that's on our planet that's right beneath our feet, that we just have lost. Because even wearing shoes, that's another little step of like disconnecting us from the ground, so it's interesting to observe that.
This is pretty much everything that I could ever hope for coming out of this conversation.
Cool.
I wanted to ask
a lot.
you any questions for me about BudLife.
I guess we've recently met and I've gone through the last couple of issues that I bought, because I know it's been like a bit of a passion project for you as well. So how do you stay kind of motivated and driven to keep creating this, where a lot of it's driven from like passion and purpose rather than profit and
Yeah, great question. I am a very project-driven person. It's kind of how I approach my day job. It's how I get by on everything else. I gotta say that BudLife is probably, out of everything that I've ever attempted, BudLife is the one thing where it's been overwhelmingly positive feedback. And everyone that I've talked to about it has been so incredibly on board and so incredibly supportive, and it's growing almost on its own at this point. I reach out to people obviously to get them on board with the next couple issues. I'm still operating at a pretty much like every 3 months I have a new process to go through for the next issue. So I'm not like, I don't have any backlog almost at all at this point. I mean, I'm only 5 issues down. So it's we're approaching a point where I'm developing a lot of processes to kind of have a bit more of a backlog and be a bit more calm about everything. But in terms of like how I keep it up, it honestly is growing into its own life, and it's getting propped up onto its own two legs. And obviously, like, the original idea was me, my partner, and our very good friend Evan sitting around a table with a big piece of paper and literally just writing out what we thought would be cool. But the concept of what BudLife is hasn't gone that much further than what we came up with that day. And I think that's an indication. It speaks to how strong of an original concept that was. And I think the timing is also right in that there's a lot of like Gardening Australia, Better Homes and Gardens, that kind of stuff is out there, but there's no real archiving or documentation about the community itself. And that's where I want to be sitting. Yep. So I think, yeah, in terms of like what motivates me to keep it going, it honestly doesn't take very much at all. And every day I wake up and think of something new to do for BudLife, and we figure out whether or not we can implement it. And it's become a very foundational part of my daily life. Even though, you know, I can't personally grow anything. Like, I look at a balcony full of dead plants every day guiltily while I work on a bunch of, plant media.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's like the electrician that has the broken light switch and the plumber with a leaking tap. I'm the same sometimes. It's like, I'm not out in the garden as much as I want to be, but I'm definitely there via osmosis with the people that I hang around with and things that I'm filling my brain with.
Like, it's kind of like when people find out that most chefs don't cook at home. It's exactly the same thing. I'm massively interested in this topic, but I don't actually do much of it myself. I'm just very fascinated by the world and the people and the communities that exist inside it.
I agree. I say the best farmers are not people who are born into farming, because they come into the space with like, how can I apply my welding degree or my electrician degree or my marketing degree into the world of farming or growing? And I think that's one of the things that we as a group of people need to celebrate more, where there are people who the whole generalist personality, where it's like you are a jack of all trades and you can bring lots of different skills to an area, and you don't have to be like a soil scientist to talk about soil, and you don't have to be an ex specialist to talk about that topic. I think it's really exciting when I always say to people, even on the podcast, like, if someone who is really good at knitting and does a particular knitting stitch pattern might look at the way that someone's sowing seeds and go, did you know that if you do this pattern, which I do in knitting, we're going to get a better, efficiency flow? And everyone's like, wow, we just solved the problem that we don't have to plant seeds in a straight line, And so I think that's what is really exciting when we cross-pollinate industries. And again, the education system has made everyone be like, you are a doctor, you're a nurse, you are a this, and I've got a PhD in this area. And it's like, then we put the blinkers on and we only service this very narrow way of thinking, where I think there's more magic to happen when we go sideways and, in all directions.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's a very particular sense that you're describing. And I do find that not everyone has that, which is so interesting to me, because I've always, this is the kind of pathway that I've always pursued. Like, it's a lot of tangents. You go in a lot of different directions all at once. And I was eager about being a master of one, as you say. But it is also very funny to me that not that many people know the rest of that saying, which is better than a master of one. Like, ultimately, I do think that knowing lots of things and coming into knowledge of a huge variety of things can only improve whatever it is that you're trying to improve on anyway. So, I mean, Andrina was right. Like, you and I meeting was really a matter of time. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this chat with me today.
Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.